to talk about sports psychology and sports psychology and everything in between. Welcome to the ultimate mental performance journey. Welcome to the Mental Barbell. My name is Ian Reardon, and I'm here with our newest consultant, Anthony Carnevale. Anthony, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited to be bringing you onto the team. It's a very exciting prospect to work with your friends, and I think this venture together is going to be really exciting, and we're going to be able to, help a lot of athletes and do some good in the sports world.
Yeah, I would say jubilation for all.
Absolutely. Well, I know you and I are pretty familiar with ourselves. We did live together for a year.
Sure. Yeah.
So I do think it's helpful though to kind of introduce ourselves to the audience and to say hello to people that might not know you. So just kind of briefly, could you talk about your academic experience in sports psychology and kind of what interested you in the field in the first place?
Sure. Yeah. I'll try to keep it as brief but detailed as possible. I think even before I went into my undergrad, I wanted to get into sports psychology. And I think at that time, it was probably around 2012. We weren't exactly as big of a field as we are now. So it's been a long time and I guess still a long time being in school still at the moment. But my first real exposure to sports psychology was at West Point, actually, when I was my senior year. I don't know if your program was similar in undergrad. We had to do like field work hours in order to kind of graduate. So West Point had an opportunity for undergraduate students, and I was able to kind of get some experience under Dr. Zinzer, who was the director of the Center for Enhanced Performance at West Point. So it was first exposure into like a very, very high performing group of people, the students or the cadets rather at West Point. So that only kind of really furthered my interest. And then from there, um, that's how I guess next is how we met. We went to the what was it, the athletic counseling program at Springfield. And we got some experience working with athletes and in high school and college athletes from there. And I decided that I like school so much that I would do another another degree and get my doctorate, which I'm knock on wood, finishing up right now. So currently I'm on my internship, but before there I was kind of embedded or enmeshed into an athletic department at a college counseling center. So I was part-time in the college counseling center and part-time in the athletic department doing sports psychology work, which was pretty interesting. I could talk more about that if people are interested in hearing that, or maybe on a different podcast episode. But now I'm just finishing up my internship at a hospital, which is kind of why very different than what I've done in the past, but still interesting work. But I'm hoping to get maybe more back into the performance and sports psychology area.
Absolutely. Yeah, you definitely come from an awesome, academic background, and clearly you've been interested in the field for a long time. Um, what kind of sports were you involved in, either growing up and kind of what level of performance did you get to?
Yeah, I would say I was a basketball player growing up. Played that for most of my life. Played high school, a little bit in college, and then got hurt, tore my ACL.
Uh,
Um, so I wasn't really, rehab's like a year-long process. And now I'm mostly just, as you can see with my shirt, even just playing golf a lot. Not any injuries, and I just really fell in love with the game. And it just seems like it's also just like one of the more mentally challenging games that you could really get into as well.
yeah, I always found it interesting that whenever professional athletes retire, they often find themselves golfing. It's
Right.
kind of the one last mountain to conquer for them that's almost unconquerable, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely always a challenge. And when you're playing great, it seems so easy. When you're playing poor, it seems infinitely difficult. But
Sure.
yeah, what about you? What brought you to the sports psych and how you got here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've been an athlete my whole life, played a bunch of sports growing up: baseball, soccer, water polo. Ultimately, I settled on the sport of swimming. Um, I was never very good at it, to be honest, as a little kid. It was always kind of just something that I did because it was something that I did, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had the luxury of like not having a whole lot of pressure on myself of like how I performed. Um, and I think that allowed me to kind of continue where other people in my same position might have, quit or not gone as far.
Mm.
But then, when I started taking things seriously and I started to kind of get my, physically started to develop into a better athlete, but also just kind of focused and decided that that's what I wanted to do. I noticed that I improved very quickly, and I enjoyed that process of improving and getting better than people that had been better than me for a long time. Um, and so, I started to look for like any kind of edge that you can get. And I read, a couple books. Michael Johnson, the sprinter, has a
Yep.
great book that really, got the fire going. And and so I got to see kind of the benefit of that mindset shift from kind of a athlete that just kind of goes about it to then being very focused and determined. So went on to swim in high school and in college as well. Ultimately was able to achieve a national championship for individually in one of my better events, and a couple of team national championships, which was very, very cool to be a part of teams like that, the highly successful programs.
Sure.
Um, and then, again, I just was interested in it. So my undergraduate degree involved a project that I did on sports psychology with NFL players and their mindsets kind of towards the game, and how that impacted how they played and how long they kind of survived in the league. Um, and yeah, and then after that, obviously, as you mentioned, we met at Springfield College out in Massachusetts, working with Judy Van Rolt, which for me was a great experience. I think we learned a lot of very practical skills. They threw us pretty much to the athletes right away, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, and they had us working and helping athletes right away, which is what I love to do. Um, and I guess that kind of leads us to here. And now I've started, the mental barbell, and trying to, involve as many of the great counselors that I met along the way, and, build something here to help the next generation of athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think we all have kind of different ways of getting here, but I think the goal is pretty similar for everybody, is just to help people improve their performance and mental well-being.
Yeah. And that's a great segue into what we wanted to talk about today, and that's that performance enhancement techniques, and finding ways to really dial in your psychology, your mentality, your energy, and perform at your best. And so today, I love your recommendation here to talk about the specific skills and topics, because I
Yeah.
think people can really benefit from them. And so today we're going to talk about energy management and stress management. I think uh, the best athletes in the world do this so well that you don't really notice.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times when you think of a clutch player, a player that performs super well in those game deciding or last clock ticking down moments, really they're athletes that have just been able to maintain their composure over the course of that game. They haven't let themselves get too hot. They haven't let themselves lose focus and get relaxed.
Mm.
But they've been able to stay in that pocket of being pumped up just the right amount, but also being relaxed and not over stressed going into those moments. So um, we'll talk a little bit about the origin of the theory. It came from two gentlemen researching back in the early 1900s, Yerkes and Dodson. They discovered that as energy or as anxiety increases, so does performance up to a very specific point, and that's what they kind of deemed as your peak arousal zone. So where you'll perform at your absolute best, given the right amount of kind of electricity in your body, for lack of better words. Um, and then after that point, so after you kind of have got to your peak arousal zone, things start to taper off and your performance starts to decrease. So if you've ever been in those situations where you're overly tense or overly stressed, and you're not as fluid in your movement, or if you're golfing, you're not as fluid through your stroke, and so your performance can decrease. So knowing that kind of paradigm, it's important to be able to identify where you are, along that line. So, Anthony, I'd like to draw from some of your experience here.
Mm.
How do you go about maybe teaching an athlete how to identify their level of arousal or level of anxiety?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, great question. I think first of all, you got to recognize what's going to be effective for what you're doing. You don't want to be low anxiety, low body arousal for a football play, but you might want to be low arousal, low anxiety for a putt in golf. So I think recognizing the situation that you're in is the first piece, obviously. And then helping people get there is just using a couple of techniques that we usually find to be helpful. But before I think we get to that, it's maybe important to recognize how you're affecting the way that your body's reacting to the situation as well. And I think sometimes we maybe aren't realizing or aware of the thoughts and cognitions that can affect in the way in which we're perceiving the situation or how that can affect our performance. So, if we think about, if I tell you don't think about pink elephants, what comes to mind first is probably pink elephants. So just
Absolutely.
recognizing that, our thoughts are going to have a huge effect, and that maybe that our brain doesn't register the word no either. So if we're standing on the tee box and you say don't hit it into the water, you're only really influencing your body and yourself to hit it actually right into the water. So recognizing our thoughts is the first piece, I think, is a huge first step. And not just recognizing them, but just becoming aware of them and what we're saying to ourselves. So, instead of when we're in front of even like performing in front of a big audience or giving a speech, if we keep telling ourselves, I'm nervous, I'm nervous, I'm nervous, that's only going to make us feel more nervous and probably perform worse. Where instead we can maybe reappraise the anxiety a little bit to just saying, I'm excited. And a lot of research has shown that even just repraising I'm nervous to I'm excited helps increase performance in quite a significant way, because you're recognizing that the body's just telling you that you're excited, and it's a good thing. You don't want to be under aroused before a big event. That's not going to help us perform well. Being aroused, the high cortisol is going to help us perform better. It's going to make us more alert. It's going to make us more locked in up until the point where it's ineffective. And that usually gets to the point when our thoughts are becoming quite negative and quite unhelpful.
Sure. Yeah, and I love that you use the word awareness, because we've always used that three-step model of the awareness, acceptance, and then action. So as with anything in sports, the first thing to make a change is you have to be aware that something is to be changed, right? So if I don't notice that every time I'm slicing my golf shot way into the woods, if I don't notice that, then I'm not going to change it, right? So that recognizing what's going on is the first step. And I think you really hit the nail on the head, where you're saying you have to kind of think about what you're thinking. You have to
Right.
like turn that mirror back around, and really appraise what your thoughts are, and then reappraise, if needed. So yeah, I very much appreciate that. And there's all kinds of techniques. Once you notice if you are overstressed, to calm yourself back down. But there's also some techniques if you're underwhelmed, you're understressed, to bring up that energy. So I think we'll start with the easy side, and that's bringing your energy up. Athletes are very good at this. The idea of getting yourself pumped up for a game. Some of the easiest things to do are just a physical warm up. Get your heart rate moving, or get your heart rate going, get your body moving, get the blood flowing around. That will really, start to energize your mind as well as your body. Um, Breathing techniques. We're going to talk a lot about breathing techniques in the future, because they're very helpful. But power breathing, where you're inhaling really sharply through your nose and kind of aggressively. If anyone remembers back in a couple years ago, Michael Phelps had a picture of him scowling all over the news.
Yeah.
And likely what he was doing was one of those big power breaths, where his face kind of makes that scowl, but he's bringing a lot of new fresh air to his body and gets that kind of jolt of electricity going. Just increasing your breathing speed in general, can be a good way. I think there's all kinds of names for it. I think yoga has a name for it. I've heard kind of the idea of like dog breathing, but you're just kind of panting, and that can really just, again, excite your body and wake your mind up.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I
but these
think,
are the, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry. Yeah, I think just breathing through your chest instead of maybe through your stomach and your diaphragm is a good way to kind of, it's almost like not really, but kind of like inducing like almost a panic attack.
Yeah.
You want to have those really shallow breaths if you want to get amped up, because you're just
Yeah.
not pumping enough oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the body.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that sympathetic nervous system, response. You're almost mimicking the shallow breathing that comes along with that fight or flight, and then your body interprets that as that fight or flight system, a symptom, and then you get ready, for that performance. Um, I think, other things like listening to music, or, just even having conversations about the future events, that can really get your mind right, get you kind of focused and energized for the performance. But those things are relatively easy, and I think most athletes are pretty good at them. What is harder now is when you're in that kind of hyper arousal, over stress, like you mentioned, kind of that panic attack mode,
Mhm.
where your heart's beating out of control, you're racing thoughts, and you can't seem to get a grasp of it. That's where the best athletes really shine. That's where they can notice it, and they can bring their energy back down to that zone, that flow state zone that we want. So, what are some of the techniques that you prescribe athletes in that situation?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of different breathing techniques out there. We have box breathing. I forget the one that the military came up with, is like 4-7-5 or something like that. The one that I just recommend is having your exhale double your inhale is typically the best promotion here. So the reason for that is that we want the parasympathetic to be activated, and it needs to, if we activate that by just doubling our inhale in comparison to our exhale in comparison to our inhale, excuse me. So whether that's 3 seconds in and 6 seconds out for your breath, or 4 in, 8 out, whatever is going to feel the best. Typically, if you have a lot of time, you want to do kind of, I believe it's called 6 breaths per minute. That's been kind of proven to be really helpful if you have a minute to do that. So you want to do, I believe that ends up being 10 seconds. So you can hold it, breathe in for 4, out for 6. That could be really helpful as well. But just at the end of the day, with the breathing technique, you want to make sure that your diaphragm and your stomach fills up with air, and you fully exhale. It shouldn't be effortful. It should be effortless, the breathing. If you find that it's effortful, then maybe you need to change how much you're breathing in and breathing out, because we don't want you to have a panic attack from your breathing technique. That would be the opposite of what we're going for here.
Yeah, I love that you simplified it down to, breathe, double exhale from your inhale. I think that's awesome, because so often we get lost in the details of it. Like, make sure I'm counting, make sure the box is 4-4, make sure,
No,
but like what you're saying is, it's more about the act of focusing on your breath, taking a big, deep, sigh, letting your body focus on that relaxation, and taking control of, that fight or flight that you're feeling. Um, I think that's awesome, and I think the immediacy of that is very helpful, right? That's something you can do at the free throw line. That's something you can do standing behind the blocks for a race,
right.
anywhere, right? And it's not some grand theory. It's just take a mindful breath. I always like to focus on the tip of my nose. So when I breathe in and
Mm,
out, what does that feel like? But it's really a way to just bring everything back to you, block out the distraction, the noise. Um, and I
right.
think that's fantastic. There are some longer term solutions, right?
Absolutely.
Things like developing a trigger. So some people, whenever they will do meditation, they'll follow their meditation with, squeezing their thumb or pressing their thumb into their leg, some sort of physical cue that will remind their body in the future of that deep relaxation state.
Mhm.
That obviously takes some training, and takes some time. Um, but other things like visualization, where if you're really anxious about the future, take some time to visualize the future going well. That can calm yourself down, that can give you a little bit more confidence, and waylay some of that anxiety.
Yeah, I
So
also think that there's a few more, like maybe in the moment, some quick hitters, I guess we could call it, to help kind of center ourselves back in. I think what the breathing really does is that we're centering ourselves back in the moment and not focusing on maybe external or internal stimuli at that point. So a lot of the times, I think when we're feeling anxious or like having stress, it's poorly focused attention. So when we do that, we're internalizing things that we need to externalize. And to be able to do that, we can incorporate our 5 senses. So we're like, what are 5 things that you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, necessarily not taste them, but or smell them. But that helps us we're back in the moment. We're not stuck inside our heads anymore with the stress that's causing it. We're back in the moment, and then maybe we can do the breathing technique now that we feel a little bit more centered. And I think another thing that could really help us bring us, shock us right back in the moment, a lot of sports teams probably have it, is just grabbing ice in our hand. It's just enough to shock the system to bring us back in the moment. It's just a little bit of pain, but it's enough, like, not that it's going to be painful, but a little bit of pain brings us, shocks us back in. We can recenter ourselves, and all we have to do is hold a piece of ice. Nobody even probably knows it's in your hand too. So it's something that you can do without a lot of people noticing it. And it's a really quick, fast acting way to kind of just center ourselves back in the moment, do the breathing technique, and lock it back in.
Yeah, I love that. It's the ice is like a forced mindfulness, right? It's like
Right.
just discomfort, or just uncomfortable enough that you have to focus on it. Um, I think that's, what a lot of people do too with like listening to headphones. I know as when I was competing, I put my headphones on and cranked that up as loud as I can, almost to like I couldn't listen. I couldn't do anything but listen, and I think it is kind of a form of that forced mindfulness, whether you can enter that state naturally, like you said, what are 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 touch, that's a great exercise. Or that kind of, I need to be present right now. Let's get there, without
Sure.
the frill. So that's fantastic. I think that's great. So one thing that I think people get caught up with a little bit is the second step. So we have the awareness, we know where we are on that inverted U, that upside down bell curve, that bell curve rather. Um, and sometimes we internalize that a little bit. Like I'm not a player that performs well under pressure. Like
Mhm.
if you're telling yourself that, or I'm bad because I'm anxious in this moment, that can absolutely get in the way of your ability to change that behavior. So like, I'll keep reminding us of it, but it's awareness, acceptance, and action. That's the pattern that all behavior has to change through. And if you're not willing to kind of accept that that's where you are, then it's going to be very hard to change. Just like you said with the pink elephant, try to tell yourself to not be stressed or calm down, right? Like that's not going to work. So having that ability to kind of forgive yourself for not being in the right place, and then say, all right, now let's move past it and let's get back to game time.
Yeah.
um
A lot
Go
of the
ahead.
times we're in these really big, high anxiety moments, we're not going to be able to control our thoughts. There's going to be negative thoughts that happen. There's going to be positive thoughts that happen. You can try to control your thoughts. I wouldn't wish that endeavor on anybody, but you can go out and try. I think something that's more effective is this: there's this skill in acceptance commitment therapy. It's called Leaves on a Stream. And the activity is basically you're putting your thoughts, negative or positive, on these leaves as they float down the stream, and you kind of just watch them go on by. And you're doing it very mindfully. You're observing them without putting a lot of value on them. Because if we put too much value on these thoughts, negative or positive, it could affect our performance. So instead of just trying to lean into every single thought we have or believe every thought we have, we can just maybe observe them without any judgment.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
or even
clean
thank
on.
them. The brain's not there to make you feel good, it's to make you feel safe. So you can just thank your thoughts for trying to keep you to feel safe, and then just telling yourself you got this. You don't have to believe everything that you think. They're just thoughts at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I love that the idea of like clinging to thoughts or like trying to push them away is the thing that brings them back and makes them more salient.
Right.
Which is a cruel irony in our field. um But I think we gave a pretty good kind of broad strokes overview of the inverted U of arousal, and some of the physical components that come with it, and the fight or flight response, but also some of the cognitive, thinking patterns that can come along with it. So I think that we can put a bow on the episode today. But we'll definitely, get into some more of these techniques in the future, and give you a little bit more detail, and try to help you and support you along your athletics journey. But Anthony, it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to our many future conversations.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the next episode.